What is the scariest thing you've ever seen in your life that you can't explain? I was about to cross the street. A lady put her arm across my chest and said, "Wait." As I look at her trying to figure out what is going on, a car crash happens and one of the cars goes tumbling down the street 2 feet in front of me. If she hadn't stopped me, I would absolutely be dead. I turned to look at her again, and she is no longer there. I could see for blocks in each direction, know where she could have gone that fast where I wouldn't be able to see her. Only thing I can come up with, is I imagine it happening in my memory due to how tragic the crash was. Never experienced anything even slightly supernatural, before or after. There is an effect in times where you may die where a seemingly very real person appears near you and gives you advice. Usually they disappear almost immediately after. It's very common for hikers climbing large dangerous mountains. They will see some other hiker warning them that it would be dangerous or that they will die, and then they disappear seconds later. You may have experienced that. This is called the third man factor. You can Google it and find different stories of people experiencing this sort of thing. There's one account of a guy who survived 9/11 against all odds and attributes it to someone leading him to right elevators and encouraging him to keep going down to get out of the building. I might have something for this. When I was young, probably around 10 or so, maybe younger. I was at a family wedding. It was late in the evening, so a full moon was out and it was getting darker. Me and my cousin, who's a year younger, were swinging on this big metal gate thing outside the venue. It was on the entrance to a very, very big field. We noticed a guy very far into the field who was just glowing and radiating white. I mean his skin, clothes, everything. I remember us standing there like, what the fuck? Then we tried to get his attention and shouted him. He stopped, looked in our direction, but he stopped right under the full moon, and pointed up towards the moon while staring at us. We were just in shock and confusion pretty much. After about 10 seconds of pointing, he carried on walking across the field and just disappeared behind a swing set. Even till this day I have no idea what that was. I'm hoping it was some costume or something, but sure didn't look like it. I was maybe 10 years old, and my grandma had just died. I didn't really know her because she had spent most of my young life in a nursing home and often didn't remember who I was when I went to visit. But, when I visited, she would always rub my back. It was sort of like an instinctual comfort thing. She did it to all her kids and grandkids. For about a year after she died, I would be sitting in my room at night, alone, and start to feel someone rubbing my back like she used to. It freaked me out until one night when I acknowledged it and said, "Thank you, Grandma." It stopped after that and I never felt it again. My mom died a couple years ago and I was staying with my dad at their house for a few months to look after him, sleeping in her bed. Every night for months, as soon as I laid down, I'd feel someone sit down on the side of the bed. I knew it was her, and it didn't bother me. I'd cry myself to sleep because I missed her so much. Sometimes I'd talk out loud to her. Eventually it stopped happening. I miss it, to be honest. Around 2003 I was walking home from work in the afternoon and just happened to look up on an overcast day. Parallel to my direction, a meteor burned up, lead by a bright burning and leaving black smoke across the whole sky. It made a low-pitched loud rumbling across the whole sky for the 3 seconds it took to travel that far. Before YouTube, no one would have believed me, much less heard of anyone who saw it. In hindsight, it was wicked cool to see. At the time, I thought I was going to die. I had seen meteor showers. I had never seen one that low, or with any volume. I live in the countryside, and when I was a kid, every day I used to go check the chickens that we had in a henhouse in the garden. It was around 8 p.m. in the winter, dark and snow everywhere. I put my shoes on and went outside. Everything went as usual, until I saw it. There was somebody standing in front of me in the dark. Or like, I wish, it was somebody. That figure was almost 3 meters tall and had red glowing eyes. I told my parents, and until this day nobody believes me. Few years ago I found out the previous owner of our house had taken his own life in the same place in our garden years before we moved in. My friend and I were driving from a gig we played in Kona on the Big Island of Hawaii. We were driving on Saddle Road, one of 2 roads from Kona to the other side of the island to Hilo Town. Saddle Road is known for being a spiritual place and lots of weird things there. This stretch of land is about 40 kilo with no lights or population. Just lava rock. We drove over the road about 1 a.m. We were talking stories and having a good time. Then we saw on the side of the road a huge white dog wearing a gold chain staring at us. We passed and asked if we saw the same thing. We were debating about stopping on the side of the road to pick it up. The local legend is that if you see an old lady on the road you need to pick her up. Or something bad will happen. We didn't stop. And didn't speak until we got home. I asked another local guy what could that have been. He said it was the goddess Pele's pet. Did some research. Looks like this dog has been seen sporadically since the 1950s. Oh, my dad actually almost picked Pele up once. He and my mom were driving around the same area you were, and they saw a woman with a dog walking down the road. Dad pulls over and asks her if she wants a ride. She declines. They get a little further down the road and my mom turns because she doesn't feel right about leaving this woman to walk. Woman is completely gone. Absolutely nowhere for her to go. About 4 to 5 years ago, I'm living right outside of Detroit, still am. To those unfamiliar with the area, Detroit actually has a lot of areas that are very nice, but the city is still very much a two wrong turns and you're somewhere very non-nice. The city I'm in is quite nice and legitimately less than 5 minutes from Detroit, so I job in the city. I also like to jog at night, it's cooler and there's barely any people around. Sounds stupid in Detroit, but I know the area well and I don't keep headphones in. About 15 minutes into the jog, I hear footsteps. Not casual footsteps but full-blown sprinting and strangely loud. It's dead silence at this point, but still. I usually can't hear footsteps if they're even on the same block. Ahead of me is a large black man, that's relevant to the story, wearing all black and he is in a full-blown sprint. Think of that scene with the gardener in Get Out. He's about a block ahead of me and these blocks aren't that large. The man has a full fucking grin on his face and something steel in his hand. All I can see are his teeth and the reflection of whatever's in his hand from a street light, and he's barreling at me. I didn't know what to do because while I'm in decent shape and 6 feet, this guy is clearly big and fast as fuck. I thought if I turned my back to him to run I'd be done for, so I just kind of braced myself to fight for my life. When he's less than half a block away from me, he just turns down an alley I didn't even know was there and disappears. I floored it back to my car. Next time on the news I see a person wanted for murder that matches the exact person I saw. 6'3", 220 pounds, looked exactly like what I could see when he got close. They found him 4 days later. I've never jogged in the city since then. One day my parents were pushing my elderly Nana in her wheelchair. She was about 90 at the time. Nana was telling my mom, her daughter, about how my mom's sister, Karen, had a friend who lived in Spain and she had been found dead at the bottom of the stairs and the lady's daughter was suspected of her murder. Shocking news in a kind of trivial way as we didn't know the dead lady or her daughter by anything but name. Well, fast forward 2 years and my mom and dad are sat in the pub and they get a call from Karen. She proceeds to tell my mom all about her friend being found dead at the bottom of the stairs in Spain and her daughter is prime suspect. My mom says, "I know Nana told me," and her sister goes silent. My Nana had been dead 18 months at this point. Karen says, "What? How?" "She died last night." My mom goes pale and passes the phone to my dad who has only heard one side of the conversation so far. My dad is as skeptical as they come. He believes in nothing, no religion, no ghosts, zilch. My mom tells him to tell Karen what Nana had said happened to her friend, so my dad tells her exactly what he heard had happened 2 years ago, except it only happened a few hours before and it was the exact same circumstances. My dad to this day just shrugs and says, "Well, all I can say is it happened and I can't explain it." The fact that he experienced this freaks me out more than any other part of the tale, to be honest. My uncle was taking a nap during 9/11 so had no idea it was happening. He had a nightmare he was in a plane that crashed into a building. Woke up to the news about the Twin Towers. Completely forgot about this until I read your post. Brought home a 3-foot tall realistic doll my grandparents had, with the intention of fixing it up. I'm scared of dolls, so I put it in a box and put a heavy metal box on top of it. Next morning the doll was gone. The boxes were still in place, but the damn thing had disappeared completely. I live in fear. Please tell us it was a Charlie McCarthy ventriloquist doll. Nope. It had pale skin, blue eyes that had the open and close function, and really messed up curly brown hair that was half torn out. One of its arms had been torn off and sewn back on. I feel like it's worth it to mention that this is due to me, at 5 years old, attempting to play with the girls with it and damaging it. Something similar happened to me when I was a teen. My parents had 2 of these 4-foot tall antique dolls that looked like children. We would occasionally hide them around the house to scare each other but eventually stopped doing that. One night, I had a nightmare that took place in my bedroom. In the nightmare, I was in bed and one of the dolls was standing next to me. I could feel it breathing and it was so close that I could feel the breath on my neck. I woke up and got goosebumps all over my body. It was a school day so I went downstairs to take a shower. Guess what was behind the shower curtain? One of the dolls. My mom put it there to fuck with me but it had been months since any of us did that. The timing with the nightmare made me fucking run back upstairs lol. Okay, so not something I saw, but something I was told someone else saw. Here's the story. My ex-girlfriend passed away years ago. Before she passed, me and brother lived together, and my brother had a big pit bull named Max. Max was an awesome dog, and she was a big animal lover, and she knew Max very well. I eventually moved out, he got a girlfriend who had a kid and needed the space. Okay. That's established. Of note, my ex-girlfriend had long blonde hair, was in her 30s, and she was buried in a pink sweater. A few months after she passed, my brother took them all on a vacation, and asked me if I could watch the dog, feed him, etc. I said yes of course. They kept him crated, and the crate was in his girlfriend's daughter's room, kind of a big basement room. I hung out with the dog and eventually had to leave, so I put him back in his crate. I felt bad, but I had to. Before I left, I looked up the sky and said, Meg, if you're still around, please keep Max company, he's gonna be lonely. So I go home, my brother comes back, whatever. A few months later, I'm talking to his girlfriend in her 30s, and we're talking about ghost stuff. She tells me that her house is haunted. I'm like, no way, I'm there all the time, I've never seen anything. She explains to me that it seemed to happen out of nowhere. She hadn't seen anything, but her daughter, around 5 or 6 years old, told her that sometimes when Max is barking or freaking out for whatever reason, her daughter tells her she sees a lady about mommy's age with long blonde hair wearing a pink sweater, who calms down the dog. I'm pretty sure I invited a ghost in their house, but I'm damn happy that I did. I wish I could have seen her. Speech bubble, man, this reminds me of my own story. I'm sure I've told it on Reddit before, but to preface, my best friend died in late 2012, this happened in early-ish 2013. I was working retail and we had a new employee, a South American guy about my age. Didn't really know him well, but on one shared break we got to talking and somehow we landed on all things supernatural. He hesitated, but eventually told me he could see spirits and often saw one particular spirit following me around. He then proceeded to describe my best friend to a fucking T. And just to make clear, he didn't know me. I had not told him about my best friend. We were not following each other on social media, and all of my profiles are private anyway. There is literally no way he could have known what she looked like, and my best friend's look was pretty unique. It didn't really scare me though. I think it's pretty neat if she truly is watching over me, just chilling. I had a dog growing up that was the smartest dog I've ever met. She was like a human trapped in a dog's body. My brother and I found her wandering around our neighborhood after school and we brought her home. She was beloved. My brother died young. After he died, she would walk slowly in a circle around a plant we had in the living room, letting the leaves that hung down gently rub her back. Every once in a while she would stop and look up at the plant for a moment, like she saw some kind of apparition floating above the plant. She would get a sad look in her eyes and let out a whimper. I'm convinced she was seeing my brother's ghost watching over us. I really loved that dog. Sounds like she was a sweet girl, and with a lot of love there came into each other's lives at the right moment. Dogs are really so intelligent, and sometimes I truly believe they know more than we do. There's actually a word for the behavior, it appears, you're describing, trancing. Interestingly, another name for it is ghost walking. No one can definitively say why dogs do it. As you said, sensing that presence of your brother, maybe even just seeking comfort as she remembered him. Sorry for your loss. It's not scary but unexplainable. When I was 10 I got into a motorcycle accident. I wasn't driving it, I was walking from school when a motorcycle hit me going full speed. I did see the motorcycle come, but I froze up and couldn't move. When it had hit me I flew pretty far and remember someone catching me when I fell down. When I got up and looked around, I didn't see anyone, and witnesses told the cops I flew at least 6 feet and fell head first on the ground. My head was fine, just had a broken collarbone. Thankfully my parents believed me when I told them. I used to go night running pretty late, 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., up a valley near my house. At one point the road I run on goes through an area with cemeteries on both sides and an abandoned Japanese Shinto temple nearby. One night during a run while I was running between the cemeteries I saw an old Asian lady standing by a bus stop. She said hi, in a very slow and deliberate manner, and waved at me. I nodded and smiled at her and kept jogging. My turnaround point was about 5 minutes past the bus stop, but when I turned around and ran back the way I came the woman was gone. No cars or buses had driven past me in either direction, and I didn't see her walking anywhere. She was there when I ran up the road and she was gone 5 minutes later when I ran down the road. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but later I realized the whole situation seemed very strange. Why was she there so late at night? Where did she go? I still get a chill up my spine remembering the odd way she said hi, and waved at me. Needless to say, I changed my running route shortly after that. I had a dream when I was about 6 years old. It was of an apartment, and inside was lots of ghosts and horrible scary creatures. They then dragged me into a room and put me in a bin full of fire. When I turned 10, I moved 200 miles away with my dad to that same apartment for my dream. The fire bin room was my bedroom. That apartment was a literal hell too, as there were loads of drug addicts and sketchy people in there. The basement in my dad's house is finished except for the storage room, which is really dark and creepy and is around the corner from the main room of the basement. There's an elliptical down there, and when standing on the elliptical, if you look over your shoulder, you can see half of the door to the storage room. I was working out on said elliptical and I felt like someone was standing behind me, so I looked over my shoulder, and in that half doorway, a dark figure with light gray eyes was standing there looking at me. I was house sitting, so I know there wasn't anyone else home. I slowly got off the elliptical and went into the bathroom to hide, then a while later decided to be bold and rushed past the storage room and back upstairs. Not the first time I had seen that gray-eyed figure either. Giant blue, almond-shaped, front-facing eyes glowing in the dark through a barbed wire fence. I lived on a forest property in a country with no large predatory animals. This was after huge bush fires, so something that lived in the forest must have been flushed to the outskirts where we lived. Even the insects had gone dead silent, and fight or freeze instinct was overwhelming. Local indigenous tribe claim I encountered a bunyip. I have no idea what it was, but I've never been so terrified. There was this abandoned house in the middle of nowhere, like 30 minutes of back roads to find it, and no other people for at least 10 miles in any direction. Me and some friends used to go check out this spooky house and show it off to 1 or 2 new folks at a time. We did this 3 or 4 times, and as we're pulling up one night, a light in the house turned on. The house didn't have power any time we'd been there, and there were no vehicles anywhere around the house that night. Scared us all to the point none of us ever went back. In retrospect, it was probably being used as a hunting cabin or meth house, although there was never any indication of either that we saw, and they probably just had the breaker off when they weren't there. A car could have been parked behind in a place we couldn't see from the road, but as high school kids, nope. Spooky house with unexplained lights. Was driving home with my family late after a day of skiing. My father likes to drive too fast for the weather, and it was just starting to snow heavily. We hit a patch of black ice, spinning us out and sliding us towards what would be a 30 to 40 foot almost vertical drop down into a wood line. Before we reached the drop-off, the area between the front and rear passenger side door completely crumpled enough to where we could see outside, stopping us on the shoulder of the roadway. Weird part is that when we go out, there was nothing there to hit. No guardrails, no street signs, nothing. The even stranger part is that it did not feel like a crash. I have been in some. We went from 65 miles per hour to dead stop with the force of what feels like pulling into a parking space. No jolt, no bang, just spinning, then immediate stop. Another foot and we would have been over the edge and likely dead. When we looked at the car, it looked like what I'd expect to see in an Avengers movie if Iron Man put his hand out to stop the car. It's really hard to put in words, but I'm convinced a higher power stepped in. When I was a child, both my parents went to work early, so they would drop me off at my grandmother's to eat breakfast and go to school from there. My grandmother died my junior year in high school, and I started coming straight home from school. During this time, my mother started complaining that when she get home from work, the receiver of the phone, an 80s style corded push-button phone, next to her bed was left off the base. I wasn't using the phone, but she would insist I must have because the phone was hung up properly when she left for work. One day, I got home a little early. Now, I need to pause and tell you about the layout of our apartment. From the front door, I looked directly into the living room, dining room, the door to the kitchen, and the short halfway that led to my parents' bedroom and my bedroom. There was no other door, the windows were old-fashioned narrow casement windows with screens, and we were on the 3rd floor. Anyway, as soon as I walked in the door, I clearly heard 2 footsteps in my parents' bedroom. I dropped my school bag and foolishly ran to the bedroom. It wasn't far and took only a few seconds. I got to the bedroom and no one was there. However, I immediately noticed that the receiver of the phone on my mother's bedside table was on the floor. It was placed so that the cord to the base was stretched out as far as it could go. I later tried to replicate the placement by shaking the table, tipping the phone, etc. I could never get the receiver off the base. When I finally resorted to knocking it off with a finger, it would fall on the table or next to it. The only way I could replicate the placement of the receiver where I found it was to carefully stretch the cord, place it, and hold it for a few moments. It could not have gotten to that spot by accident. When I found the phone, I hung it up and it immediately rang. I answered it, and it was my dad. He asked what was wrong. I asked him why he asked. He said he had called, apparently just before I got home, and someone, he thought it was me, answered the phone but never said anything. He finally hung up and had been trying to call back and only got through after I hung up the phone. I've never figured out what happened. I definitely heard footsteps and I'm just as certain there was no one there. No one went by me. The windows in the bedroom were not disturbed, and my parents had too much stuff under the bed and in the closet for anyone bigger than an infant to hide in either spot. Also, after this, my mother never found the phone disturbed again. I was about 12 at the time. Every year my parents and I would drive from Montreal to Nova Scotia to visit family. Having always gone the Trans-Canada route, we decided to go through the States for a change, so we ended up going southeast through Maine and eventually on to New Brunswick, then Nova Scotia. I remember we were in a very remote area, like hadn't seen a house for a long time. This was before GPS and Google Maps, so there was a growing concern in the vehicle that we might run out of gas. I don't remember the name of the road, but it was a country road that had mountain on the right side, went straight up through dense bush. And on the left it was dense bush and a steep downhill where I could make out a river at the bottom of the cliff, about a 75 to 100 down the hill. Trees hung over the road, so despite it being a sunny day, the road was shady, with the exception of places where the sun would break through. I heard my dad up front ask Mom, "What the fuck is that up ahead?" As I leaned over to look up down the road, we could all see what looked like a man off in the distance on the side of the road. Too far to see color or anything, just a big dark shape standing there. As we rolled on down the road, this dude or whatever it was crossed the road, both lanes, and I shit you not, 3 to 4 steps, once on the other side of the roads, just vanished into the woods. As we got to the spot where he had crossed, Dad slowed right down to look around. Nothing, not a sight of anyone, no trail, nothing. No one knows what they saw, but 30 years later it gets brought up every couple of years and the feelings are mutual. Fucking weird and creepy. My very first job was as a radio DJ at a small, hometown radio station in the mid-1990s. This was a tiny building out in the middle of a field with a 500 feet antenna out back and a single road from the main road to the front door. The transmitter was right behind my studio, behind sound dampening glass, and had a light bulb that was always on. The station was so small that you could see the light bulb in the transmitter room all the way from the driveway/roadway. There were only 2 doors, the front door and the back door in the transmitter room. That door didn't even have a handle on the outside, and it was always locked from the inside. It's impossible to enter that door from the outside. I worked the evening shift, from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. After my shift, we actually went off the air for the night. I was always the last person there, so after I went off the air I had to pull commercials for the first hour or 2 of the morning show, clean dishes, finish up some production work, etc. After working there for a year or so, I had racked up a couple of weird experiences. Shadows scurrying about at the corner of my vision. Lights turning off and on. One evening, after getting in and taking over the board, I was just sitting there preparing myself mentally for the next 5 hours. I looked up, out the studio doors towards the front door, and I saw the perfect shadow shape of a man who was probably 6 tall. It was there. Then not. I went to my boss, who was not a nice person on her nicest days, and said, "So, I have a weird question." She sighed and looked at me, expecting who knows what. "Have you ever felt like someone was here who wasn't?" My boss yelled across the building for someone to come into her office. When that person arrived, she tilted her head at me. "He's seen Jimmy." Supposedly, everyone had seen Jimmy, the original owner of the radio station. "He popped in from time to time. He won't hurt you. He's just checking in on the station." So, from then on, Jimmy would make his appearances. His was a harmless presence. My studio faced another, unused, studio, and he would flash the lights on and off a few times. I'd say, "Hi, Jimmy. Everything's going well." And it would stop. He turned a water faucet on once. He whispered my name in my ear one night, which freaked me out. At least, I think it was him. You see, there was another malevolent being that also lived there at the station. It didn't have a name, and it was about shin high. This one always gave me a really bad feeling. It was the one who would dart beside me, its shadow just in the corner of my eye. I always knew it was there, just because I would feel downright freaked out. One night in particular was the scariest I've ever been. Here it is, 30-ish or so years later, and I still can't explain it. As soon as everyone left the building for the night, I got that feeling like it was there. I just turned on all the lights, turned the music up, and tried to ignore it. The longer the night went on, though, the worse it got. Lights were flashing everywhere. A dot matrix printer in the sales office started going on its own, something that never happened. And that office was locked. Then, ceiling tiles starting moving up as if someone hit them with a broom handle. They started closest to me from my studio, down the hall, and ended at the front door, which was locked. Then, the front door opened. A locked fucking door opened. I went down the hall to close and relock it. When I did, I saw through the door window that there was a coffee cup and a cigar on the front stoop. There was no reason for them to be there. On my way back to the studio, I got a big burst of cigar smell, like an invisible smoke cloud, right in my face. I knew my usual duties were required, but I didn't care at this point. I went off the air, grabbed my keys, and noped right the fuck out of there. I ran to my car, backed up, and looked through the front door. A figure was standing inside, silhouetted in front of the transmitter light. I peeled out and went straight home. Now, all of that is screwy. But it's not the most unexplainable thing. Is it 100% impossible someone didn't somehow sneak in and play a very elaborate prank on me? No. There's a slight, minuscule chance someone did, but to this day, I don't know how. It was an old, tiny building. But I still hold the possibility that it could have been a prank. I got home and told my mom this whole story. My heart was still pounding. She was all, well, it's bedtime. So, I go to my bedroom and dial up a BBS to write someone what had happened to me. As I was typing up the story, my modem speaker turned on. If you are old enough to remember dial-up modems, you know the speaker doesn't just turn on once the connection is made. They wouldn't even turn back on if someone in the house picked up the phone. You'd just get a lot of bad data on the screen and your modem would disconnect. The speaker turns on, and a voice comes from the speaker, mixed with the static of the data connection. It screeched, "Help, me." The speaker then turned off, and nothing else changed on my screen. That speaker turning on and the voice coming out is solidified in my brain. I remember the screech like it was yesterday. I have no explanation for it. My mom was the only other person in the house, and she wouldn't have done something like that. She couldn't have done something like that. It was the scariest night of my life. I am as skeptical as you can be about anything ghost or UFO related, but that night is beyond my ability to explain. As kind of a footnote to all of this, I go back to that station every now and then when I go home to visit. I still know some people who work there. Jimmy is still active and is well known by the staff. The little scary one? No one else has reported seeing him.